All right. Tell us all the interesting bee facts.
Well, so what's very interesting is how we identify different bumblebees. They all look the same for the most part, but when it comes down to it, we pay attention to the abdomen. Abdomens are segmented, and they have about 6 segments. In each segment, starting from the thorax, which is the midsection, it's T1 through T6. And so in a lot of our native bumblebees, we really focus on T1 and T2. If only T1 is colored, as in just yellow, it is a Bombus impatient bumblebee. If T1 and T2 have color, then you kind of look at T2 specifically. And if T2 has a partial yellow band, so it's only a yellow band in the middle, and on the sides it's black, then that is a 2-spotted bumblebee, which is Bombus bimaculatus. And then finally, with the 3 most common bees and the bees used in the study, if T2 has a rusty brown band and T1 has a yellow band, that's Bombus griseocellus, and that is a brown belted bumblebee. Makes sense because he has a brown belt.
Interesting. And what is there anything else that comes to mind, like things that you've learned recently that you're like, oh well, who knew? Interesting little.
I think what's something that's actually pretty interesting is when you really are focusing on bumblebees and you're actively trying to identify them, you start to kind of see the same common one over and over again, and that makes sense because we're actually in the height of the bumblebee season, so you're going to see the ones that produce the most, be the most abundant. But every now and then you see a bumblebee that is not like the other ones. It's a little bit different, and on about 3 occasions this summer I've run into what I suspect to be Bumblebees pennsylvanicus, which is a very uncommon bumblebee. They're very specific with what they pollinate, and they're currently kind of being investigated because they might be in decline. So we don't really know for sure. It's kind of hard to track them, but it's just kind of nice to see this one bumblebee that is just almost all gold and is just giant. It just doesn't look like a bumblebee. It looks very different, and you see them flying around, and then they're gone, and then you probably won't see another one for the next couple of months.
Interesting.
If at all, until the next summer.
How many native bumblebees are in Virginia? About.
So that's a good question. Let me I have my
Stats sheet.
Yes, my stat sheet. There are a ton of different bumblebee species.
You just had it. Is it in the chair?
I'll put it in this side. So there are many different species of bumblebee, but in Virginia we have 7 for the most part. So that's these. You can find this. This is by the Smithsonian, and this is also kind of a good identification sheet, and you can kind of see these are the 3 that I was talking about right here and kind of their characteristics. And then this is pennsylvanicus right here. You can see
a bunch of yellow.
A lot of yellow.
This guy has a bunch of yellow too. Oh, yellow bumblebee.
Yeah.
How creatively named.
I took a quiz just kind of for fun, provided by my professor, on just different bumblebee names. And if it wasn't for the common name being listed, I probably would not have gotten as high of a score as I did, because they're all named based on what they look like. I mean, brown belted bumblebee, yellow bumblebee, half gold bumblebee, and
2-spot.
2-spot.
Yeah.
2-spot's different though, because he's got the 1 spot in between his thorax, which is the 1st spot, and most bumblebees have that. But I guess the tiny yellow band is the 2nd spot. So it's a little misleading on that one. But once you know the trick, then you got it. It's just interesting once you start kind of focusing in on something, how different they are, and then you kind of start to appreciate when you see something out of the ordinary that you wouldn't otherwise realize.
That's fascinating. Okay, so are you ready for what is your favorite insect?
So that's a very loaded question, because of course
I know you're picking favorites.
I know. Of course, I'm very partial to bees, and I love honeybees. I've really come to like bumblebees through this study, but every now and then you just kind of come across an interesting insect with just an interesting life history. I mean, even just the other day I was walking and I saw a lunar moth just chilling.
Yes.
Early morning, and those are interesting because when they metamorphosize, they don't have a mouth, and so then they're on the clock to find a mate before they pass away, but they're just absolutely beautiful.
Yeah.
praying mantises,
Mantidea.
mantodea. Those are always fun to see.
Yeah.
And I think an insect that I think I've always liked a lot was the patent leather beetle. They're the second largest beetle on the east coast, I want to say, and they're about 1.5 inches long. They're a very shiny black. But what's interesting is they're one of the few beetles that actually live together in a community and will carve what are called gallows in logs. And so they'll make these big nests and they'll carve all these tunnels like termites, but they're giant. And I always found that really interesting, is that they will actually make these, and you don't really see this in a lot of other beetles, but they'll make these nests and they'll rear young and they'll all live together just fine.
And we have them here in Virginia?
We do.
Nice.
If you look under logs, very rotten logs, you're almost certain to find them.
Awesome. Okay. Is there an insect that you really do not like?
So, I think all of the insects that are just on my do not like list are all of your invasives that are just absolutely wreaking havoc. The Asian citrus cichlid, that's a hard one to say, that's currently spreading greenie to all of our oranges. Japanese beetles, bad. Are tintworms, gypsy moths invasive? I'm not sure. They kill a lot of trees.
I'm not sure either.
So that's not good, but I mean...
And we don't have the lanternfly yet.
Yet. I have my supervisor and professor is actually currently studying lanternflies, because I did not know this, but tree of heaven, heavenly palm,
Atlanthus,
yes. Is actually the primary food source for lanternflies.
Yes, and it's all over the place down here.
All over the place. So the minute we get lanternflies, they're not going to go.
No, and they've entered Virginia, I believe. They just haven't gotten to
a little bit
this area.
They're spreading around. They're starting to check them at road stops, because the females will make like a concrete type structure out of mud. And, I guess they love to build them onto trucks. And I don't.
Yeah.
Who would have thought that that's where they want to build them? And now you got trucks that go all the way up and down highways.
Yeah, I've heard like in the northeast where they're really bad. They like force all the trucks to go through like washes before they leave the premises. Ugh. Yeah. I am not looking forward to them.
And I think, for the most part, one of the major damages that they cause is when they feed, they create that nectar from the sap. And that is what gets on other things and causes mold to grow. And that mold is what blocks photosynthesis on the plants.
Yeah.
And it can really, and when you have a lot of them, and you also have a lot of their primary host plant, it's pretty bad real quick. So all those bad invasives are kind of on my I don't like list.
Right. That's why we're really glad to have our invasive plant intern, because they've been pulling up all the invasives.
I mean, I like them where they belong.
Sure.
So, you know, if
they're
I was to,
technically very pretty.
Yes. If I was to go and visit them in their natural habitat, we're good. But then they come here and not as good.
Awesome. Thanks for doing this, Curtis.
No problem.